Joining us is former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Senior Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute and Fox News contributor, John Bolton. Ambassador, so good to see you this morning.
Glad to be with you.
All right, so that speech, it was lengthy, it was wide-ranging, and it is causing a lot of reaction both last night and still this morning. What were your thoughts on it?
Well, number one, who cares what John Kerry thinks? His administration is about to become history, thank God. This is a venting, I think, of frustrations, and I think history will soon begin to ignore it. But he exposes a number of fallacies in the worldview that I think has motivated Barack Obama these last 8 years when it comes to Israel and the Middle East more broadly. So having it all in one place, having every mistake put together in one 75-minute speech, really can be helpful to historians for researching how to ruin a foreign policy.
Yeah, Ambassador Bolton, this is Kat. Why would John Kerry and Obama go out and, make this kind of speech when it doesn't, does it really matter to anybody when Trump's going to be in office in less than a month?
Well, I think they're trying to box him in. I think that's what Resolution 2334 last Friday was all about, and that does pose significant problems, although they say they're not going to support further Security Council resolutions. Their credibility leaves a lot to be desired. I think they were very disingenuous about their role in 2334. So there's a reason for concern between now and the 20th of January. And I think also it's a measure of the kind of harassment we're going to see from Barack Obama when he leaves office on the 20th of January. He's going to leave, but he's not going to go away.
Fair point. Everybody is wondering how much we will hear from him after his terms are over. Ambassador, that being said, you just wonder how much damage has been done at this point when you say that they're trying to box Trump in. I spoke to Alan Dershowitz on the Kelly File last night, and he said the peace process in Israel has been set back years. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I think what a lot of people in the United States, particularly Barack Obama and John Kerry, don't get is that there's been a massive shift of opinion in Israel over the last 4 or 5 years. And I think what it indicates is they don't really intend to accept a settlement that leaves terrorist states on their borders. So the fundamental premise of John Kerry's speech is, well, if you have a one-state solution, Israel will be demographically overwhelmed by higher Arab birth rates, or the only other alternative is a two-state solution, is just fundamentally wrong. There are other solutions. And I think that's what we need to look for now, because the two-state solution, the near religious mantra that the Obama administration has been voicing these last 8 years, is empirically impossible to achieve. So if you want peace in the region, and I think the Israelis do, you better look at other alternatives.
Ambassador Bolton, Mike Block here. You mentioned how this resolution may have been orchestrated by Kerry or other elements of the Obama administration. We've seen the Obama administration make these moves, and I'm just going to call sabotage, where they're messing around with certain elements of Homeland Security. He has a few weeks left. Is there anything else you're particularly worried about that this administration might do to make things more difficult, or just prove some sort of juvenile points here? It looks like that's what we're seeing.
Well, I think later today, at least according to the forecast reports, we're going to hear the Obama administration's proposed sanctions against Russia for its hacking of our election, or its efforts to interfere in our election. I guess the one thing I could say that applies kind of across the board, domestic as well as international, is that to the extent these actions are all executive moves by the president, they are all easily reversible after the 20th of January. It's a very ungracious, unpresidential way to depart, but I don't suppose we should be surprised at that.
All right. Meanwhile, Ambassador, the Obama administration will reportedly announce these retaliatory actions for Russia's alleged hacking during our elections. Sanctions, indictments, restrictions for Russian diplomats were some ideas that have been tossed around. According to published reports, Trump was asked if government information on Russia should be made public yesterday. Here's what he said.
Do you think any records on Russian intervention should be made public? I think what they should do is do the best they can, figure it all out. Figure it all out.
Ambassador Bolton, do you think that retaliating against Russia would stop this type of hacking?
Well, I think absolutely that should be our goal. And well, we'll have to see exactly what the Obama administration proposes, and there may be some things they do that they're not going to make public. I think you can see already they have fundamentally misunderstood the nature of the threat. They're responding with sanctions as if this is some kind of legal violation. If, in fact, the Russians did try and influence our election, this is an attack on the United States. It's an attack on our Constitution by whomever did it. And it's just as consequential potentially as destroying dams and bridges and roads. So if it's an attack, this warrants really a kind of military response, not necessarily in the use of active military force, but understanding we're not talking about somebody who knocked over the local Starbucks on the corner. It's not a law enforcement violation in that way. And what we've obviously failed to do over a sustained period of time is build up structures of deterrence in the cyber world that convince people not to do it. So I think the retaliation has to be much more than sanctions. I understand, obviously, there's some things you don't disclose before you do them, and maybe even some things you don't disclose after you do them. But I think there ought to be a sufficient retaliation against Russia, not a proportional response, a disproportionate response that ultimately we can announce. So the whole world knows if you try and affect the United States electoral process, you are going to pay a very steep price. We can impose that cost, and you better think very long and hard before you do it in the first place.
It's been a minute since we've reconvened, Ambassador Bolton, and looked at the Trump transition. How do you think it's going? I mean, here we are just a few weeks out from the baton being passed.
Well, I think by all the statistics that we can see, they're on track or ahead of most other transitions. It's always a tumultuous period. I've been involved in transitions going in and transitions coming out. It always looks hectic. It is. But I think as January the 20th approaches, it tends to concentrate people's attention. The new Congress will come into session next week. Confirmation hearings will begin. And then we'll see how it goes. The real test, obviously, begins with the inaugural address, incredibly important for a new president coming in, and then we'll go from there.
All right, very good. Ambassador Bolton, so good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Glad to be with you.